My name is Jesse Ray, here with the Growth House podcast. I'm here with my friend Adam Laor. You have one of the top startups in Arizona.
I guess I do, yeah.
That's impressive.
Thanks, man.
So your story is incredible, first of all. I want you to kind of take it back. And it's not even like we have to go that far back. Because how old are you right now?
I just turned 20 a few months back.
Just turned 20 years old.
Yeah.
So when did this start? Like, when did you realize I want to start a business? I'm going to start making some money. Was it high school?
Yeah, so I don't think I ever really contemplated, like, wait, I want to do X.
Yeah.
I think there was just a natural pull to it. So, born and raised in New York City, been building and selling stuff for the web since I was probably 7 or 8.
7 or 8?
Yeah. This
what
is
were
funny.
you selling on the web at 7?
Have you heard of the show Thomas the Tank Engine?
Yeah,
like Thomas the Train,
yeah.
Right. So when I was 7 and 8, around that age, I used to watch this show all the time.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, I believe the company that makes all the toys is called Mattel.
Uh-huh.
And so Mattel at a certain point stopped making the wooden version of the toys, and they shifted to only plastic. And all of my friends wanted my wooden toy sets because they were turning into these collectibles. And I had just crate on crate on crate of them. And so I was just like, all right, I'll give you a crate for like $25. And it worked. And so we just started trading and selling wooden toys for cash. So that's how it started. Kind of did a whole bunch of other random stuff on eBay until I was probably 14 or 15. My mom was a typical Israeli New York City corporate drill sergeant. So really intense, one of those tiger moms. And so she sent me to this very prestigious Jewish private school in New York, and tried to drill me to be very intellectual and very education heavy to go to one of these big schools. And I just got tired of it. I just revolted, and so I forced my way out. I think it was sophomore year of high school, to just like a regular public school in the city.
How did you force your way out?
Well, the problem was most of I'd say probably half of my days inside of this private school is called Solomon Schechter, were Jewish studies. And so I was just tired of it. They didn't teach it to you in a way that was engaging. They taught it to you in a way where they would just throw it down your throat. And I was just like, okay, I don't want to do this. Most of my friends would start school at like 8 and get out at 1. And I would start school at like 7:15 and get out at 4. And so I was like, I'm not doing this. I guess the cliff notes on the rest of childhood and starting off was I helped build one of the biggest retail pharmacies in Queens called Town Pharmacy. So I was in charge of pretty much the entire front store, all the OTC revenue.
Okay, that's not normal for someone at your age. So how did that happen?
I found that out, yeah. So a few different dynamics talk about like right place, right time. Yeah. So this all happened when I was around 15. And oddly enough, the principal in that private school, her name's Ofra Hiltzik. Ofra, if you're watching, you know this. She told my mom, I was a big troublemaker in school. I was just so bored. And so, I had my own desk in the principal's office. It was really bad. I was just really rebellious. And so my mom during parent-teacher walks in and she's like, Ofra, when is my son going to stop being such a pain in the ass? And she's like, give him time. And once he's 15, watch, everything's going to change. And I don't know how she knew or what she saw, but she was spot on. The second I turned 15 was when I left private school, went to public school, and then my mom was like, all right, look, if you're not going to go to a Stanford or a Harvard, then you have to get dirt under your nails, go work. I was like, well, I don't know what that means. And she was like, I was like, well, does eBay work? Look, I'm making money on eBay. And she's like, no, it doesn't work. And I'm like, okay. So there was this tiny independent pharmacy that had opened, maybe a 10 or 15 minute walk from my house. It was called Town Pharmacy. And at the same time, I had also started interning and kind of shadowing the director of all digital marketing at Calvin Klein in the city. So learning how to run ads online, Facebook and Google primarily. And so I walked into the pharmacy. I actually got dared by my best friend, to be like, hey, you won't walk into that pharmacy and ask for a job. And I'm like, all right, say I won't, I will. Yeah. And so I walked in, I got the job. And as I started to kind of go through the OTC inventory, I started noticing, wait a minute, most of our inventory is between 25 and 70%, sometimes more, cheaper than all of the other over-the-counter inventory in other retail stores, like retail pharmacies. And so I was like, this is interesting. Hence my time at Calvin Klein. I went behind the owners' backs and started running a whole bunch of ads on Facebook and Google for probably our top 8 to 10 SKUs. And after, basically it pretty much just clicked. We had a lot of families. We were catering to a very high-end clientele in the city, so we were doing like free same-day delivery, and on top of that, there was a grocery store next door, and so we, for no charge, would also get their groceries. Like, this was a very white glove kind of pharmacy, and so very quickly, everybody in the neighborhood was just immediately drawn to that service, and so not only did they start coming to buy over-the-counter inventory from us, but they also started coming to buy, moving their prescriptions to us. So that's, yeah.
So you did behind their back, meaning they saw this spike in customers.
Yeah, orders and over the counter, like over the counter orders.
Where is this coming from?
Yeah, they're like, what the hell is this? And
Yeah.
so like they went online, and like me and one of the owners, Eldon, had chatted a lot about like launching these ads and all that kind of stuff. So he went onto the Facebook account for Town Pharmacy, and he's like, this bastard, like he's running ads, like what the hell? So yeah, he was mad, but then he wasn't mad because he was like, you went behind my back, but like we're making a lot of money now. So it's like, so that was kind of my first real introduction. I basically ended up growing the front store to thousands of SKUs, millions of dollars in revenue over the next 2.5 years or so, and up until I graduated high school. And then I got into tech kind of illegally, somewhat skeptical, a little weird. So when I moved from private school to public school, I didn't know, but I had nearly enough credits to actually graduate as a sophomore. But New York City doesn't allow you to just skip. New York City, I think, requires you, at least when I was in school a couple of years back, they require you to be in class at least, I believe, 6 hours a day, something like that. Like you have to be in school for at least 6 hours a day.
Take a certain number of credits so you can fit that.
Yeah, like hours and time and whatever, right? And so my schedule for pretty much, I think, all of sophomore and junior year was just blocks of free periods. And so the first period of my day was an attendance period. So I'd walk in, I would come up to a teacher, and I'd say, my last name, Laor. They'd check my name off on this sheet of paper, and then they told me to go sit down in an auditorium for 45 minutes, and I just sit there. One day, one of these teachers came up to me, Miss Sue, and she goes, Adam, I need help printing something off of Microsoft Word. And I'm like, okay. I was actually with a friend of mine, but she asked me specifically. And so we go over to her computer, and on her computer was not Microsoft Word. It was the New York City attendance database, the Department of Education's attendance database for New York City. And so we got our own username and password. And so on the first Saturday of every month, we would log in and pre-mark ourselves present. So yeah, that's...
So you didn't go to school junior or senior year?
No, you can ask my mom. I wasn't in class. In fact, in my yearbook, I graduated 2020. There's no record of me in the yearbook. Like, I'm not there.
Did you ever get it?
Oh yeah, I graduated.
You graduated.
Like, I've got my transcript and my letter of graduation, like all of that kind of stuff. But like, I'm not in the yearbook.
That's wild.
I just wasn't there.
Yeah.
That's it.
And then what were you doing when you're not in school? You were helping
in the pharmacy. I was building the pharmacy. I was selling YouTube, running around Manhattan, Calvin Klein. Yeah, man, just getting the work in.
That's crazy. Okay, so you graduate. What's the transition to get into tech and then also to Arizona? Why Arizona?
Yeah, so a couple things, right? So when I want to say when I was 16 or 17, I was walking around Manhattan trying to find some lunch. This was while I was at Calvin and interning behind this director, Brandon. And so there was this big deserted mall with a little restaurant sign outside of it that said Cloud Kitchen, tour now, or like eat now, And I'm like, what is this? And so like there was all these big glass walls, and I was looking through, and I'm seeing all these kiosks and this counter with this like conveyor belt coming out and what I thought looked like a robotic arm moving things. And I'm like, what is this? This was like probably 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
And so I walk in and I'm like, can I like get food here? And like, I'm clearly lost. And so a gentleman, he was in a suit, he comes over to me and he's like, yeah, you can get lunch here, but do you want to like check out the place? I'm like, sure. So I get a tour of this place, and it turns out that I didn't know at the time at all. I only found out probably 4 or 5 months later after reading an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that the gentleman that gave me the tour was Travis Kalanick, the founder of Uber.
Wow.
And so when he left Uber, he started a company called Cloud Kitchens, which was really from all of the learnings that he got from building Uber Eats, right? And I might be mistaken, so don't take this with a grain of salt, but I think Uber Eats was actually an accident. I think that started with like an experiment with an ice cream truck at Uber headquarters or in a neighborhood, and then they realized, wait a minute, we can move more than just people, we can move things, right? And so that's what really started to propel Uber Eats. So I got into food and beverage that way. Tech, I like I said, that was kind of my vague introduction. I learned about my first real brush with like startups and whatnot was landing on the Sequoia Capital website and seeing Steve Jobs and Google and Cisco, and I'm like, oh my God, like I want to do what these people do. There was just this natural pull. It just happened. Like I was like, whoa, like this is what I want to do. And then I noticed that Cloud Kitchens was opening most of their locations in Phoenix. And so I was like, why is that? And the deeper I dug, I realized, the second COVID hit, all of the remote workers at a lot of the distributors and the suppliers in the bigger cities all migrated here. And so these companies were like, wait a minute, why do we have 86 remote employees in Scottsdale or in Phoenix? I don't know, but let's open an office now. And so all of a sudden it just became this hotbed for food and beverage across the supply chain. So that's why I chose Phoenix, and I also wanted to start a ghost kitchen, hence why I was looking at Cloud Kitchens as data. So yeah, that's that.
That's wild. So you get to Arizona. What did your parents say? Like, obviously you were only, 18 at this time?
17? Yeah, I graduated early. It's either 17 or 18, one of the two.
So your mom was just like, you want to go to Arizona? All right, see ya?
Yeah, so my parents, when growing up, we traveled all over the world every summer. But they never got to travel inside of America, right? And my mom loves to hike, and they just got tired of New York. So once I made the decision of like, you know what, I'm gonna go check out Phoenix. I mean, we had family down here, and like we'd always like at least, I don't know, come out on vacation here during like winter break once or twice from New York, because the winters in New York are brutal. Winters here are like magical. Yeah. So they were like, all right, you know what? Like we don't need to work anymore. We don't want to work anymore. So like we're just gonna come out and hike and hang out. And so they followed me afterwards. But I think my parents did a really great job of being not only. I mean, my mom was really tough. I was a mom's boy, and my mom would just follow. My dad would just follow whatever my mom said. My mom was really tough. And it's funny, but when my friends meet my mom, I'll tell them like, hey, like beware. And they're like, whatever. But then when they meet her, they're like, wait a minute, like you're not kidding. Like she's rough. But I think it's one of the biggest gifts I could have gotten, because she was rough, but she knew how to be tough and let me go roam, but also when to pull the reins back a little bit and like give me my boundaries and be like, hey, like morals and ethics and things like that. And also just help me label certain things, right? So I had a really good balance. So my parents never really, gave me much pushback or questioned me at all. I think they were really confused by why I was selling stuff on the web, like why I was very entrepreneurial. I mean, my parents are like as corporate as you can get. They're not entrepreneurial at all. And I think it's interesting, like I grew up in a very nice part of Queens, New York, and I lived in a very nice neighborhood, but my parents were actually the only household in the entire neighborhood that went to college. And everybody else didn't go to college, and everybody else had a much bigger house, had a much nicer car. They all ran their own businesses, and so I grew up around those people, right? And so I think that probably indirectly, affected me a lot. So yeah.
Super interesting.
Yeah. And also keep in mind, Jesse, like this goes all the way back to when I was 14 and 15. My mom always knew I was rebellious, hence her asking the principal at Schechter, like, when is my kid gonna stop being such a nuisance, right? But I think over time she started realizing, she's like, oh, like he's just bored. Like that's why. He looks at it and he's like, no, right? And it's hard. I mean, I also have a very vague memory of something in kindergarten where I was so task oriented, and there would be, I was either 0 or 1 in terms of my interests. I was either completely disinterested or something, or if there was something that like pulled me, I went in all the way. And so people would actually, like teachers would have to come and like physically pull me to like move me to different like parts of the class, or like literally come over and be like, Adam, snap out of it. Like, we're going to the next thing, because I was just so dialed in. So I had all these weird quirks growing up. My parents didn't really know how to label it. But I think over time they had enough data where they were like, oh, okay. So by the time I came to Phoenix, they were like, yeah, this is to be expected.
Do your thing.
Yeah.
We know you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
So what happened? You came here and then you started Sinatra.
Yeah, so I came here and I didn't start Sinatra the second I got here. So let's see. I came here, and when I came here, I was reading a book. I hate reading. I don't like to read at all. I'm like, at all. And so probably one of the few pieces of literature that I've ever read that I was like, wow, this actually is very valuable. I think it was called Loser Think by Scott Adams. And he also had a few blogs that he wrote. I don't recall if it was the book or the blogs, but it was by Scott Adams, where he talked about the future of the workforce is going to be skills oriented, not degrees oriented. And he was talking about, like, if I were 17 or 18, right, I would figure, okay, I would pick a domain, and for whatever domain that I want to go into, obviously if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, right, or like some crazy mechanical or aerospace engineer, you have to go to school for that kind of stuff. But like, if you want to, start a startup, if you want to work in sales or marketing, like whatever, like that stuff today is it's questionable in terms of school, right? Like, why are you going to go? And so I wanted to skill stack. And so when I got here, I was like, okay, I want to be great and build something really, really big. I didn't know what it was. At the time, I thought it was going to be this cloud kitchen. And so I just immersed myself in every possible thing from in terms of a cloud kitchen and running it, the business fundamentals, the food fundamentals, all that kind of stuff. So I did that for probably 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, every hour of the day, I didn't sleep for a month, basically. I almost drove myself into the ground. I was just consuming so much information. And at the same time, I was also starting to get pretty vocal on LinkedIn. And there was a student at GCU. He was at the time running their, I think it's like their angel investing group or something. And he wrote a post that was something along the lines of like, hey, if you read books, you can be Mark Zuckerberg. And we ended up exchanging something like 60 or 70 comments back and forth on this LinkedIn post. The cliff notes of what I was saying is like, dude, buzz off. That's just false. Yeah. And that led to a gentleman reaching out to me and being like, hey, I don't see people that think this way very, very often. Like, I'd love to grab lunch sometime. And that fellow ended up becoming one of my first investors.
So a LinkedIn beef
yeah.
ended up leading to your first investor.
Yeah,
That's hilarious.
And that first investor led to the introduction to my co-founder, Brian. And Brian was just this big hospitality junkie, like just a brilliant brain of hospitality, a wealth of knowledge. He used to be the director of food and beverage at both the Phoenician here and the Four Seasons. He started the first ever wine app on the iPhone. He bought and sold a ton of different restaurants all over the world, including a company in Mexico called Cali Burger, which was the In-N-Out knockoff. And they actually beat In-N-Out, which is insane. It's a totally separate story. And then he ended up, starting a salt company called True Salt, just all natural sea salt from the Sea of Cortez in Mexico, which is now used in tens of thousands of doors across the country. It's the fastest growing salt brand. So that's how I met Brian. He and I ended up starting a ghost kitchen. We wanted to eliminate, or I shouldn't say eliminate, we wanted to make it cheaper and more convenient to order chef-grade food outside of the home, as opposed to going to the supermarket, buying the groceries, preparing them, all that great stuff. And so we launched that. We took over this huge parking lot in Gilbert, Arizona, and there was, I want to say, probably about 9 or 10 pickup lanes, 5 to 7 cars in each lane during peak hours, and only one exit point. So the city of Gilbert actually...
How did you guys even market that to get that?
So we were at, what's the name? Greenfield Lakes Golf Course.
Okay.
And so what we would do is during the day, all of these golfers, Gilbert's, I think the average household in Gilbert's like 4 or 5 people. So it's very family oriented. Yeah. So, the fathers, the mothers, they would all be golfing during the day, right? Like on a Sunday morning at like 10 a.m. And so we'd give the caddies like little postcards with QR codes for them to put in orders for dinner that night and come pick it up at the golf course's parking lot, like to go. So we had a built-in demand generator at the actual location, and then there was we retrofitted a kitchen to like actually cook and bake and prepare the food. Brian put together a team of culinarians. I did all the software, and that was it. And so fast forward, I mean, it worked, but it was very capital intensive, and it kind of didn't work.
Did you guys get shut down or something?
Exactly, yeah. So there was definitely demand for chef grade food that would serve 4 to 6 people at like $25 period, like for the whole thing.
That's a great deal.
It's an unbelievable deal. But it's so capital intensive, and also the real estate and logistics, this is why I mean capital intensive. The only way you could have made this work is really to have had a budget of around 8 figures to start from day one, because you need room, you need land for this kind of volume. And so yeah, we had 10 pickup lanes, 5 to 7 cars in each lane at peak hours, 1 exit point, and so it was just this bottleneck of traffic. And then the city of Gilbert, yeah, like you said, was just like, stop, little slap on the wrist. So that was the ghost kitchen. It was called Poppins. And then that was when Brian came to me and he was like, hey man, like I as a restaurateur, I as an operator, I'm sick and tired of having to use 25 different tools, of which most suck and most are very expensive. And he's like, all day long, I've got tech guys like me coming in, trying to pitch a point of sale, a table management, it's just all the same garbage. And, they're just tired of it. They want something new, and they're just jaded. And so he was like, I want to build a single system for the industry, a single platform, but we need to find a wedge. And so that was when we started Sinatra.
That's amazing. And then give me a quick overview. Obviously one of the top software startups right now in Arizona.
Yeah.
Where is it at? Where is it going to be in the next 2-3 years?
Yeah, so we went to the market, and you see the hospitality industry is interesting. Everybody knows how big it is. Everybody knows that it's global, the same, food, hospitality, right, all that great stuff. The problem is you've really only had 2 big hits in the space ever, over maybe a quarter century of people building software in the space, that being Toast and OpenTable. Toast is really just a better distributed point of sale. And then OpenTable built, obviously, the infrastructure for table management, right, for reservations and whatnot. We went to the market and we were like, okay, we need to find a way to land very softly, right? Where honestly, we don't really need to, where at least the sell to the operator was really simple, if not non-existent. Because the best way to sell to a restaurateur, and I'll elaborate on what I mean by this later, the best way to sell to one of these people is to just not. It's to just not. So we went out to market. We talked to probably 20 or 25 of the top brands here in Phoenix, the Phoenician, True Food Kitchen, the Four Seasons. We said, like, okay, what's your guys' biggest hair on fire problem right now? And they all said, training our staff. Retention, it's hard to hire. The churn is so bad. It's awful, right? The cost to train these people, it's inefficient, right? And so we were like, okay. So we built a tool in February of 2023 and launched it that digitized training for a lot of these operations. And we went after it, I want to say, for probably like 4-ish months or so, up until like this summer. Did well, got onto a few dozen locations pretty quickly. But then this is where a lot of the key information started to happen. And really the huge spike. Our primary distribution channel, like our way of getting to market, was working with the largest insurance broker, and insurance brokerage, I should say, bar restaurant insurance in Arizona, for hospitality specifically. And so the CEO of this brokerage, David DiLorenzo, or as most know him as D-Lo, D-Lo came to us and he was like, guys, there's a big part of training staff that involves compliance, that the insurance carriers mandate and require as part of their policy to their customers, these operators, the restaurateurs, to do. But the problem is the carriers have no connectivity, they have no way to administer it. It's really chaotic. Most of it is done through papers and pen. And then that was when we also realized, wait a minute, the whole set of an insurance policy, audits, inspections, claims, documentation, all over the place, just chaotic. So fast forward to this summer, Delo then introduced us to one of the biggest insurance carriers for hospitality in America. They ended up being a part of our pre-seed round. Our pre-seed round was probably a total of about $2.5 million. We raised it in two separate tranches. We did our first tranche last October of 2022, and then our second tranche in, I believe, July of this year. 2023 is when we closed it? Yeah. That second tranche was led by a fund called 1517 Fund in San Francisco, which is one of Peter Thiel's funds. So that's how we kind of got into insurance with hospitality. And so we built a tool, basically an app, that these insurance carriers in hospitality will use to administer Sinatra inside of every single one of their customers' insurance policies and say, hey, now as part of your package, instead of doing these audits and inspections, on an annual basis and only giving us one piece of data and doing it paper and pen, now you're going to do it once a month. We're going to get 5 to 6 times that amount of data. It's going to be much easier, and it's going to save you, the operator, really 3 things. Number 1, it'll flatline their rates, their insurance premiums. It'll kind of stabilize them. Number 2 is by submitting this data, now they get access to discounts, right? Within each slice of their premium. And then last but not least is, as an operator would say, insurance doesn't matter until it really matters, which is when a claim happens. Let's say Sally's in there and a bartender overpoured her and she gets in her car and boom, big accident, she kills somebody. Goes to court, there's a big suit, right? The restaurant's on the hook for $500,000, big liquor claim. Present day, when the plaintiffs walk into a restaurant and say, hey, I need your training manuals, I need your liquor certificates, I need your insurance policies, I need all of this documentation, I need to see every audit and inspection that you've ever done. Present day, I don't know if you've been to the back office of a restaurant, but it is chaos, right?
Organization is not
it's just not there, and they're just so busy. It's just they've got so much going on. So present day with claims, it's like, hey, when that accident and claim occurs, now the insurance carrier can say to the plaintiff, everything's right there. Yeah. And the dynamics really change. The time that a claim takes to process gets shrunk dramatically, which leads to, not only being able to show, hey, we've been mitigating risk, so the size of that payout decreases, but also the legal fees go away because now you don't need to pay a lawyer $125,000 to go and find all this information. You don't get you don't need to rack up 192 legal billing hours, right? Because now this is all documenting it for you. So. We're gearing up now to launch into 13,000 locations by the end of this year.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been moving.
I love it.
Yeah.
So we have 2 different audiences. We talked about this before the podcast. We have the people that are working W-2. They're aspiring to quit that job, go all in, start their business, have rental properties, etc.
Yeah.
And then we have another group of people that are startup founders, or maybe they have their business. They're looking to scale to that 7-8 figure range.
Okay.
Let's talk about on the basic level, when should a company look at raising capital, and what types of companies should even look at that rather than just revenue and grind it out?
Well, most companies are not going to be venture backable, and that, let me just get this out of the way, is not a bad thing at all. A startup by definition means growing fast. And what that really means is you're growing anywhere from 10 to 15% a week for years, if not way more. So just the kinds of companies that can sustain that kind of growth for years on, it's just few and far in between. There's also a lot of, it's very sexy to take on venture capital, right? It's like all these big name firms and all the big companies in tech raise venture capital, but what's funny is the best companies actually don't need to raise money. Sometimes you might have costs that you need to offset to get off the ground. But once you kind of get up to, what we would consider a seed round, after a pre-seed round, getting into a Series A, you should technically be like, no, we can kind of keep running, but we want to do more faster. And that's where venture capital is there, right? So if you have a business that you think is venture scale, right? And a good rule of thumb is, can you within 5 to 7 years get to at least $100 million plus of annual recurring revenue through a piece of software? Then maybe something to contemplate. If not, I would avoid venture capital. Not for you. Yeah.
What about, when do you look at how early? Like you said, pre-seed. Can you kind of just explain what size company are you? Is it post-revenue, pre-revenue?
So pre-seed, so let's say you're a founder that does have a venture scale idea and you want to go raise capital and you're like, yeah, no, we're on that kind of a trajectory. Okay. So the labels of different rounds are so contextual to the kinds of companies, right? I'll use Sinatra as an example. Our pre-seed round was really for just a lot of R&D. In the beginning, we were working with a lot of heavy-duty machine learning software, as well as hardware, like with cameras. So we needed those dollars to not only for the equipment, but also, I mean, if you're going to work with truly talented machine learning engineers, like they cost a lot of money, right? So it's contextual, right? So if you're building something that's so heavy technically like that, then yeah, you're going to need some dough. But if you're building like a really simple enterprise B2B SaaS platform, SaaS is in software as a service platform, like really simple, probably don't need to raise that much money, right? So pre-seed is usually an idea, bunch of guys in a garage, hacking away, right? Really not even barely a product, maybe a really amateur looking demo, right? And then you'll probably raise a pre-seed of, I don't know, the average in the Valley is usually $500,000 to $750,000, I would say. Maybe around $1 million, but that's usually like a good range.
And are these angel investors? Who are these people for pre-seed usually?
A lot of the time what'll happen is you'll have a pre-seed fund come in and kind of provide an anchor check of maybe 100, 200, 250 and lead the round, right? And then yeah, for the most part, then you'll have angel investors come in. Then a seed round is kind of like, okay, hey, we figured out a go-to-market, we figured out a product, we've got some product market fit, we've got some revenue. We want to pour the growth gasoline on this. Like we've experimented, we see what works, we want to start to pour it on a little bit here, right? That's what a seed round is for. And then Series A is like, that's kind of your transition out of like a really fast growing startup into a really fast growing organization. That's really when it starts to be like, oh, okay. Because at that point, your Series A, you're probably raising 8 figures plus. So that's kind of usually how it looks round by round.
What about incubators, accelerators? What's your thoughts on those? Who are they good for? Who are they not good for, in your opinion?
So I look at startups a lot like sports. I have a very extremist view on this. I think if you're good enough to play on the field of tech startups, you don't need an accelerator or an incubator to like huddle around you and be like, hey, this is how you build your business. I think it's like nobody's on the field with Patrick Mahomes telling him, hey, throw it to him. Like he's just doing it, you know? He can throw the ball 50 yards. Like he doesn't need an extra 2 guys to like launch it for him, you know? Like he can just do it. I think tech and startups and business in general is a lot like that, right? I think there's only one accelerator that I would consider going to. Well, I guess there's one specific and then there's also an exception. The one specific is Y Combinator. Y Combinator is probably the most famed startup accelerator out there, and there's one reason why only I would recommend them is because of Demo Day. Demo Day is at the end of the 3-month sprint with Y Combinator, and what it does is they basically give all of their companies in their batch, probably like, I want to say maybe 5 minutes or so, to get up on stage in front of hundreds, maybe 1,000 investors, all in Silicon Valley. And you can pitch in front of them. And it creates, there's a saying in the Valley that time kills all deals, and it's true. It creates this artificial time box of like, hey, we just got out of YC. We're raising capital now. We've got all these different term sheets coming in, and it allows us founders to close capital fast. I've never seen, it's so rare for founders to be able to manufacture that themselves. Y Combinator has that systematized. So I would recommend Y Combinator.
Mostly it's for the access.
Yeah, the access and the signal.
Because everything else you can learn.
Yeah, the access and the signal. Absolutely.
Explain signal. I know you're big on signal.
I mean, Silicon Valley is really big vocally. Everybody knows about it. They've heard of it. But it's a very tiny, potent network. And what they want to know, what those investors, the top investors in the Valley want to know is that you're friends with their friends. Your patterns look like patterns of companies that they've invested in before, right? And And so Y Combinator is a pretty big signal of like, yep, you fit the mold, right? So your chances of getting a check from a VC in the Valley are significantly better if you go to Y Combinator as opposed to if you don't. And then one other comment. So the exception I was talking about with accelerators is maybe something strategic, right? So if, let's say you're trying to break into like, I don't know, the finance industry or something like that, right? And you're trying to build a fintech product. And there's an accelerator that pops up that's like specific to fintech and all the group partners are in fintech and all that kind of stuff. I mean, as long as the terms aren't egregious, it might be worth it. Otherwise, you can still get the ROI of a strategic accelerator out of just relationship building and also performance. Yeah.
Talk to me about pattern matching. This is something I didn't know about until we talked about this one day.
Yeah, so this is what we talk about at JamPad.
Actually, let's start there. JamPad.
Yeah.
So I always like to give backstories.
Yeah.
Because it's always interesting, like, how did you meet these interesting people?
Yeah.
So one of my friends, Davin Michaels from Puerto Rico,
Yeah.
came out, did our Growth House Entrepreneur Boot Camp that we held here last year.
Okay.
Davin, OG in marketing, online affiliates. He introduced me to Alex Mendozian.
Okay.
Alex introduced me to Eileen.
Yes.
And then Eileen, I told her about Growth House and what we're doing, and she goes, have you met the people in JamPad?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, what's JamPad?
Yeah.
And then they're like, you gotta meet Adam. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. She's like, this 19-year-old kid. I'm like,
What?
all right. I guess
Yeah.
I'll see what's up with Adam.
Yeah, let's see what's going on.
So fill me in, what's JamPad?
Yeah, so when I met Travis in New York, and then I became really infatuated with his background. And I had learned that before he started Uber, he had turned his apartment in San Francisco into basically this hacker house where engineers could come, they could build product, they could launch software, they'd write angel checks to each other, they'd couch surf, they'd play Wii tennis. Like it was a hacker house. Excluding Uber, billions of dollars of companies came out of that little hacker house, excluding Uber. And so when I first came to Phoenix, again, most of my investors are in Silicon Valley, some in New York. I have a very small select few here in Arizona, but it's predominantly in the Bay. And so I'm kind of used to that startup scene, that kind of culture, the people there, the lingo, all that great stuff, right? But as I got plugged into the food and beverage scene here, that was like, I really got deep and enriched into that. But then I was like, okay, we need to hire some talent. So what does the talent ecosystem look like? Well, in terms of engineering, let me tap the startup ecosystem in Phoenix. And I just wasn't impressed. I really wasn't impressed for a variety of reasons, which is a totally separate topic. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm just going to take this upon myself. I'm going to start JamPad. I'm going to restart it. Here we go. And so it's been around for, I want to say, at least a year and a half now. We've had over 3,000 people apply to JamPad. I've tried to turn it pretty much into a version of the Teal Fellowship, but for Arizona specifically. Just kind of a feeder to the ecosystem of taking a founder that's very early stage, I'm talking as early as like a PowerPoint, to a venture backable pre-seed founder. Somebody that's raised capital from a pre-seed fund, that's got product to market with distribution and like is ready to start building, right? Get to their first 6 figures of ARR and then beyond, right? Yeah, and then I think companies in JamPad have raised, there's probably 14 people in JamPad, maybe 13, something around that number. They've raised a little over 20 million.
That's awesome.
Through the network. So that's great. We don't take anything from people. We're just like, hey, like we want to build the ecosystem. Like come in, let's start building a flywheel, right? Let's start giving back, paying it forward, and building an atomic network in Phoenix. And so yeah, that's JamPad. So our criteria, the way that we vet founders for JamPad is a triangle, basically. It's a methodology around a triangle. And so you really have to try and hit all 3 corners simultaneously, in our opinion, to really break out as a Bay Area venture backable founder. And so what those 3 things are, number 1, we'll start with pattern matching. VCs in the Bay Area write checks. This is, I mean, people are not going to like to hear this, but it's just the truth. They write checks. 80%, maybe 90% of the checks they write out there are to 3 archetypes of people. Number 1 is the ex-startup guy or the ex-big tech company in San Francisco guy. I used to run product at Apple. I was the 30th engineer at Snapchat, right? You know, I was, director of HR at Tesla. I mean, whatever, right? Stuff like that, right? That's a shoo-in usually. Archetype number 2 is ex-finance bro. You know, the pattern looks very similar. I went to Stanford, went to Harvard, worked at McKinsey, then went to Bain. I'm probably 6'5", you know, and now I'm starting a company, right? Easy. And by the way, the reason why, like that is a specific archetype, I mean, it's self-explanatory for the first one. The reason why this is a second archetype is because tech is the new Wall Street. When kids go to college today, they're not looking forward. I mean, obviously some are, but what's talked about mostly from people in my generation in school, they don't want to go to Wall Street. They want to go to Sand Hill Road. They want to work at Sequoia. They want to work at Andreessen. They want to do that, right? Instead of maybe go work at Blackstone. So that's why a lot of those people end up migrating over to tech. It's the modern day Wall Street. And then the last archetype is basically my archetype, which was really pioneered by Peter Thiel and the Thiel Fellowship. And the GP at 1517, the general partner, Danielle Strachman, she built the Thiel Fellowship. And that's the young 20-something that's like running around. I mean, it's Zuckerberg, right? Running around, dressed like an idiot, right? Completely socially inept, but just doing all sorts of crazy maniacal stuff. Those are the 3 archetypes. You know, for those watching that are like, what the hell, what do? I don't fit those 3 archetypes. It comes down to storytelling. And you know, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I always share when it comes to pattern matching is actually from one of my investors. He wrote the book called The Lean Startup, Eric Ries. And Eric told me, he's like, hey man, you know, we can talk about game all day long with VCs and all these patterns, but at the end of the day, a spreadsheet is a spreadsheet. And if you can build a great company, investors at the end of the day are trying to return that capital to their LPs, their limited partners that have supplied them the capital. That's all that matters to them. So you could be a Stanford grad, you could have skipped college, you could be from, I don't know, Menlo Park, you could be from Zimbabwe. Like, it doesn't matter to these people. If you have a spreadsheet that is ripping, you will get backed in Silicon Valley. Like, you just, like, there's a way. So that's what I would say. If you don't fit one of those 3 patterns, focus on just building a great company. Like, and if you're good enough to build a great spreadsheet, you're probably going to be good enough to get networked, you know, pattern match and all this other stuff. So that's pattern matching. So that was a little bit winded. The second one is warm nodes, N-O-D-E-S, right? As part of a neural network. It's just having access, right? You never want to talk to an investor through a cold introduction, right? You never want to cold email them. You should always be measuring, okay, if this person's going to introduce me to, you know, I don't know, a general partner at a firm, what's their relationship to this person, right? What's their background? Are they an LP in their fund? Are they an analyst? Are they a fellow GP? Do they work at another firm? Are they a portfolio company of this firm? All of those optics really matter. And so it's your job to just get access to the network. You just need access to these people, right? And then the last part of the triangle is charts, which is what I was just saying before about spreadsheets. So to break in summary, what we've seen is we want to see a little bit like some fractals, a resemblance of a little bit of pattern matching, storytelling really, a little bit of a chart, right? And then a little bit of a network and access, right? And if we see a little bit of each, or a line to be like, okay, if we do this, it'll immediately seed that specific part of the triangle, that's when we bring people in. So yeah.
I love that. That's such a good breakdown too.
Yeah.
What about people who are just going to start something and they're like, because I've actually been on calls that say, hey, we don't invest with people that don't have a co-founder. That's sometimes like a criteria. What do you think about having a co-founder off the bat, doing it yourself for a while? I think
it's so contextual to the company. I mean, even a lot of what I'm saying right now, it's like, these are just very, very high level general frameworks. But when you get into the nooks and crannies of every company, boy, is it different. Because of the dynamics and things can get very interesting. I don't know if you know this, Jesse, but I think the number one reason why a startup fails is actually because of co-founder conflict.
Really?
Yeah.
Not lack of capital?
Nope. It's co-founder conflict. So obviously if you don't have a co-founder, that's immediately eliminated, right? So it's like, that's interesting. I think separately though, having a co-founder just means that you guys can split the work and do things faster, right? Ideally, you have somebody that's probably technical and non-technical, or if you're in a very specific niche industry, you have somebody that's like business builder and then like industry node, right? Like a yin and yang that way. But you don't want two clones of the same, right? Like if you're like you don't want two, it doesn't work, right? I would always suggest trying to find a co-founder, and if it's natural, take it. But if it's not, don't force it, because again, like these are people you're really getting into bed with. I mean, this is truly a marriage.
Yeah.
It's a marriage, you know, and so like you've really got to know this person. You've got to trust this person. Like it's really serious. So don't try and do it fast. Don't half-ass it. It's okay to go off as a solo founder. Some people will bring it up, but again, spreadsheets tell all. And if you walk in as a solo founder with a ripping spreadsheet, not many people are going to bat their eye.
Right. So Adam, you speak your mind a lot.
I do.
How do you balance being authentic, which that's what I love about you? First day we met, I'm like, this dude is genuine.
New York.
Like, he's speaking his mind, true New Yorker. But then on the other side of it, how do you balance coming across maybe as too brash or, you know, someone that's easily misunderstood? Because I know I've seen a lot of growth just during the last year where you're like, you know, I'm going to say this a different way.
I think it comes down to, at least for me, is there a more productive way to say what you want to say? Basically, is there a way to take a dump on someone's lawn and still have them thank you for it? There's a way to do that. It's an art. It's really hard. God, I've pissed off so many people, and I've been such an ass to so many people to like learn this. But that's the answer. You know, a lot of times they'll be, every day there are instances where I'm like, what the hell? Like I just get agitated, and I'm like, why are you doing this? Or, that doesn't make sense. Or, you're such an idiot. Like all this kind of stuff, right? But it's not productive to turn around and go to that person and blurt that out.
Right.
It's productive to turn around and say, hey, you know, that's interesting that you thought of it that way. What do you think about this new framework? Right? Then you make it their idea, right? And you not only make them feel great, right? The receiving party, but you also make progress in the meantime.
So good.
I also think separately, it's just confidence. You know, I think it's just confidence in yourself and what you believe. You know, I think a lot of people today consume, right? They look at what this person's doing and that person's doing and this, and they lose sight of like who they are actually and what makes them unique. I think something that I noticed about like when I first came to Arizona, people in Arizona are much more polite than people like me from New York. And so I knew that I was like, all right, I'm going to stand out, you know, like I'm just much more in your face. I'm much louder. It's just who I am. I'm a New Yorker. I was a city kid, right? And I'm very competitive to a fault, not only from like academics and intellectual stuff, but like I played tennis in the USTA growing up. Like I was a big sports junkie too, right? So I like to win. I was raised to win. That's what I was raised to do. And so when I moved here, I was like, okay, people on the West Coast are much nicer than the East Coast, but I don't think they're as real as the people on the East Coast. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to probably piss a lot of people off with my attitude and how loud I am and I curse and all that kind of stuff, but it's who I am. And I don't really care if other people have a problem with it. I think there is a time though when you say, okay, look, I'm going into a meeting. I need to have my shit together, right? And then there's a time when it's like you're on LinkedIn and you're touting something. Like there's times when you really have to step up your game. But you know, I think over time you just learn and grow. And I mean, for me personally, I mean, I'm only 20, so like I'm still learning a lot. I have a long way to go, but I think I've come a long way. So yeah, that's what I would say about that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Growth House, we have a motto: you become who you surround yourself with. How important is that to you? And just kind of expand on what that means to you and maybe to your life.
Yeah. I'm weird. I don't like to surround myself with many people. I'm not, you know, a lot of founders in tech like to go out with each other and go to play soccer. Like I'm not, it's not me. Like I'm not, like we're competing. Like I'm not here to pass you the ball and get an assist. Like, no, like I'm taking the ball up the court. I'm going to go dunk the ball. You got to figure it out. I don't know. Maybe you got to go join a different team. I compete with myself. I have this voice. It's funny. So Eileen probably said this to me, and I'm like, holy crap, that is so true. The way you talk to other people is the way you talk to yourself. And I can be so harsh with other people because, Jesse, I am so disgustingly harsh with myself. I won't allow myself to I just don't. I am so straight and just locked in at all times. So I'm competing with myself, and I like to hang out with people that are much older than me, that are much more successful than me, and it's not even close. It's almost embarrassing that I'm even talking with them or spending time with them. But that's where I learned. That's what I like. I don't like to be around a fellow founder that's trying to figure it out. I just don't. I'm happy to help, but we're not going to hang out. That's just not my thing. So that's me. But again, that's still having some kind of voice in your head of hey, get after it, go do it, right?
Yeah.
You're around that all day because you're in your head, right? I think it's so important for other people that need that kind of social interaction and whatnot.
Kind of why you started JamPad.
Exactly. Precisely. It's really important for people to know, especially in the line of work of being a founder, that there are other people out there as nuts as them, as smart as them, and as ambitious and crazy as them. 100%. I think it's important to get into a room once a month and be like, holy crap, there's other dudes here that are jumping out of the gym. Oh my God, whoa, yeah. I'm not the only dude trying to do this. Wow. Right? I think that's inspiring for people. It gives them friends, right? But I will say this, Jesse, this is something that I'm learning now because we're at this stage of the company. I'm starting to think about who's going to be on my board and who are my top lieutenants going to be, who's going to run product, who's going to run engineering, who's going to be my COO, who's going to be my director of HR, all of these different silos. And you're lucky enough to hit one of these in your life where you can go build something really big. And I mean really lucky to hit one, forget about a second.
Yeah.
These people that you choose to be around you, these are the people that you break bread with for the rest of your life. I mean, these are the people you're around all day. These are the people that are going to come to your wedding. These are the people that, are going to meet and play with your kids. I mean, these are people that are going to play huge roles in your life. And so what I've found very beneficial is if somebody's in that position, try befriending those people. Try getting closer to those people. You're all in the same boat. I think I'm in a little bit of a unique situation because I'm also 20 and I can learn from these people. But, I befriend these people. I go out to dinner with these people. I build camaraderie with these people. Yeah. I mean, all of these little details.
So right now you're in a stage where you're literally building out the company. You're looking for your board spots and you're 20 years old in this leadership management position. How has that been? What's the hardest part, being in that position at your age? Or is it hard? Or is it natural?
I'm going to be really honest with you, man. It's been pretty natural. I think performance trumps all. Performance really trumps all. I think if you're not performing and you're kind of acting like a 20-year-old, maybe questions arise, but to be honest, I've never even had that. That's just never been a thing for me. So I would say it's been very natural. It's been moving at light speed. That's probably the most difficult literally week over week over week, things the bar just keeps going up. To just give you a frame of mind, beginning of September, which was 4 weeks ago, we were okay, let's try and get to, 5,000 locations by the end of 2024. And then we were no, we can probably hit double that by the end of 2024. We can probably get to around 10,000. Then it got to, wait a minute, we can do 10 to 13,000 by the end of this year, 2023.
Let's go.
And then by the end of 2024, there's a good chance we can maybe get up to 30 to 50,000 accounts, locations. So it's just moving with that velocity. It's, that's a lot, we did an entire product revamp of not only an app, but 3 separate dashboard components all within 4 weeks. You're talking about war rooms, 24/7, lockdowns, just getting after it. I'm bothering my top lieutenants. I'm not kidding. Shout out to Jeff Steinberg. Jeff, I mean, I call Jeff, I think sometimes maybe 10 times a day. Like literally, and it could be we on a daily basis might talk for a cumulative 2 to 3, sometimes 4 hours a day, just consistently, because there's so much going on. I think it's the speed has been tricky, right? It's just, I can manage it because I have other people around me that have experienced this kind of speed. And I also kind of just treat this a lot like an athlete, I think, treats sports. You know, like I can tell when it's game 52 out of 82 of the regular season, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, I don't need to go all out here, but like I need to just get by today, okay. But then I can recognize when it's like, all right, man, it's game 7 and there's 2 minutes on the clock. Like I need to go, right? And that's what we call internally bull rush time. Like it's time to go get it, right? So I've really learned like how to throttle my energy internally. When to hit the gas, when to pull back, when to kind of go, you know, middle of the pack. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Is Sinatra the next unicorn coming out of Arizona?
I will say this. You're putting me on the spot. I will say this. You know, of all the ecosystem talking that I do and all the noise that I've had, it's now, you know, I've pulled back from JamPad. You know, Eileen really now is running JamPad, and there's probably 2 or 3 others that are. I'm just a beacon in the background, really. But it is my sole purpose in terms of the ecosystem for Arizona. I have one job and one job only to do for the next 5, 7, 10 years, and that's to give Arizona its first Uber, its first Airbnb, its first like $50, $100 billion company. Anything that's not that is a failure, and everything that's going on right now with events and groups and pop-ups, this, that, the other is great, but an Uber for Arizona completely just sends this place to an orbit the state couldn't have even imagined. And so I think humbly we are very well positioned right now to do that. We just have to keep executing. That's it. So, and I will add one more thing. To your previous question about me in this leadership role, I think I have to give a ton of credit to my team, the people around me. I've been so fortunate to have very experienced, really good people around me. Eric Reese, you know, Jeff Steinberg, my co-founder Brian, now one of my other co-founders, really part of the founding team, D'Lo. I would even say the entire team at Illinois Casualty, you know, this big insurance carrier that's one of our investors. You know, one of my angel investors, Danny Friday, Eileen. I mean, it's just, I have a family in the business world. I really do. You know, and I think that's where I really lucked out, is I have a lot of great people that really actually have my back, that in their own ways are Mike Randall. Randall, thank you.
Shout out Mike.
Yeah, Randall. Like there's just a laundry list of people, I can't name them all, that I just have to thank profusely, that have made it really seamless to just step into that role as like the CEO of like a very fast moving organization that's starting to turn into something very large very quickly. It's super exciting, but it's definitely a lot of responsibility. And so I think being able to have a lot of stable people around me has been a big help.
Last question. How do people reach out to you if they want to be on JamPad, be a part of JamPad, or potentially join Sinatra?
Yeah, so we just closed our first hiring sprint for Sinatra. The team's now at about 10 people, I think. 10 or 12, one of the two. It was kind of crazy. I think we opened up applications for example, just a software engineer. And then I want to say within 2 hours, I think we had over 700 applicants, something like that.
Signal's working.
It's working. It is working. But yeah, I mean, if you want to work at Sinatra, I think we still have 1 or 2 open jobs. And I mean, we're going to continue to hire. because the team's going to need to grow quite fast. 13,000 locations is a lot of locations. So go to LinkedIn. There's a whole job board there. You can email us also at jobs@sinatra.ai. If you want to reach out to me, I mean, I don't use social media. The only thing I use is LinkedIn. You can hit me up on LinkedIn or shoot me an email personally, adam@sinatra.ai. So, yeah.
Love it. And I want to say something to you, man. How much I appreciate you. I learned that we don't hit our goals, we get our standards. And you're someone that challenges my standards.
I'm glad to hear it, man.
And there's not too many people in my life that do that. So I do want to say while you're here, while we're on camera, that how much I appreciate that.
No, I mean, it's it's funny. I learned last December. I took my first shroom trip last December. I'm on the board of this company called Day Trip, which is the first psychedelic therapy practice in the state of Arizona. And I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do any of that stuff. But I saw a lot of my intellectual friends experimenting with shrooms, and one of the key things that I learned after shrooms was that I have this effect on people of like restarting the pulse. Like this is part of where there's again pros and cons to being the in-your-face, loud, brash New Yorker. One of the pros is like you can really get to people. You know, there's a presence about it. There's just a rawness and like brashness about it that hits for people. And so I try to only use that for good. And so you talk about like throttling energy and whatnot. Whenever I see somebody that's kind of within my circle where I'm like, ooh, like this person, like if they get a little bit of like an extra boost, they can 10x wherever the hell they are right now. Like I'm always happy to provide that. So I think you can do that. And yeah, like I like doing it, man. I'm always gonna be a pain in your ass. So
And I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, that's it.
Bro, get in here.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
Likewise, dude.
Jesse Ray, Growth House Podcast. You probably can't even see us right now. Adam Laor, Sinatra. Keep a lookout.